Join us with our in-house therapist and friend, Steve, as we dive into toxic family dynamics and healing insights.
How's everybody doing tonight?
All right.
Good.
I'm doing good.
We got our friend Steve back on.
Steve
So
is
is number 4? Is it number 4 or number 5?
Four.
Number 4?
Oh, wait.
Four.
I'm still waiting for my jacket.
For the,
we gotta make
it-
be
yeah.
Like on
Alec Baldwin,
SNL.
Yeah, the
for our
Alec
show.
Baldwin, yeah.
We're still working on it.
Yeah, you be the Alec Baldwin on this one, yeah.
We're still working
Yeah,
Or
on
at
it.
least like
yeah.
a cameo in the picture or something like
Yeah,
that.
I just don't draw too good, so I can't make a jacket with the markers.
Okay.
So next time, yeah. That's
crazy.
That is too funny. So what's going on, fellas? Everybody's good?
Yeah, we're
What's
good.
today's topic, Cole?
Well, this is really Tom's topic.
Tom's
He's the
topic?
one
My
who
topic.
brought it up. He was
Yeah,
the
of
one who
course.
said, we should do a topic on toxic family members.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I think it's an important topic. I think we kind
handle
of
those people.
experience that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
That's a good one for me to come back to, bro.
That's why we have our guest with us.
Yes.
Very helpful with that stuff.
All right. So what's
The
your
old
for
toxic
those who don't
family.
know, Stephen is a therapist, so he always gives good insight on certain topics like this. So it's great to have him on for this part.
See, the sports of therapy. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Tonight's
Well, so
We are
tonight's a
going
therapy
by the way,
question.
just to let you know, we are going to have him back on. We're going to be talking about sports again. You know,
right.
it's a fun topic for us to talk about.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
we'll be
We got
talking
things to talk
that.
about. So this will be that'll be sports therapy.
Sports therapy, right?
there we
That's
go.
good. That's
Yeah.
good. Or,
There you go.
Well, you say that. I think
and if you have rooting for two different teams, you have a toxic. There's the toxic
There's
family
a toxic
again too.
family
Family
member.
Like
yeah.
if my wife was a Yankee fan, we'd have a toxic
Yeah.
But
family.
when you say
That's
sports therapy, I think of like physical therapy.
therapy.
Right.
Oh,
that's
well, it'll
technically
be
what it
mental
is.
therapy.
Yeah.
Sports mental therapy.
Yeah.
Bada
Mental
bing.
health therapy. Oh, by the way,
Yes.
this is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Oh,
Is it?
Okay.
What's-
It is. So
Where
let's
are we?
make sure we
Oh, we're in May. I thought that was.
right, we
I thought it
announced
was in
that.
June.
So that's very important,
Yeah.
especially with this episode. But toxic family members, we all have one. I have probably several.
Me too.
Me three. Yeah,
but-
we all do. We all do. But then, okay, so what are we gonna say is toxic? What
Well,
would we
it's just-
like? What would be the definition of a toxic
I
family
would
member?
say benevolence. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, just not being, kind.
Okay.
I think
There's
it's
a
more
being-
than more than
there's
just not getting
manipulate-
along.
you
It's
know,
more
yeah,
than it's more than
yeah.
just being like having siblings that have different views on life. I mean, a toxic family would be something that was really very destructive to the
Yeah,
to the foundation of a family.
Okay.
Whether it's a result of somebody's mental illness or substance abuse or abusive behavior. I mean, those are the big factors
all
that
of the
would,
above.
or all of the
Yeah.
above, right?
Of course.
Addiction is a diagnosable mental illness. So,
Right.
like having those things in the roots of the family really is where that toxicity would typically come from,
Or even your new family if you have in-laws.
or
and
new,
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah. If you listen, you marry into a family where one of the parents is a an alcoholic or a drug addict or has a serious mental illness, and it disrupts the ability to function in a productive manner.
Yep.
Your family, it bleeds in. If you marry into somebody and they're your spouse's mom has always been abusive. That comes into your house. That
Right.
you deal with it now. You deal with the relationship that your spouse has with her family, and
Something new to
yeah.
juggle in your life.
Going to dinner. Going to holiday dinners. They're not peaceful and quiet. They're so people were saying
Absolutely.
I always when years ago I worked in the recovery field and worked in rehabs, and we did a lot of stuff especially like around the holiday times. There was like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, like the Bermuda Triangle of dysfunctional families.
Right.
And you had it didn't age well, but we used to always talk about like everyone thought their family was going to be the Cosbys,
Right.
right?
Right.
Pre-Bill drugging and dating and raping people, but how that family was always presented. And the reality is most families were like the Bundys,
Yeah,
where the drunk uncle who was fighting with you or something like that, or somebody stealing from everyone's pocketbooks. There was that was more what was realistic than
Right.
than that wholesome family, the Waltons, or I guess that's better than
Which is
better than
right, which is
than-
not that stuff is just,
Yeah.
right. Of course,
So-
it's never going to be like that. So I guess there are families who don't have as much, but they have something, right? We all do.
I mean,
as we're sitting here talking, I'm going through shit in my head.
oh yeah, of course.
Just
Yeah, I mean,
rewind the tapes.
yeah, I feel like I would find it hard to believe that there would be like a family that exists that is like just like we said, the Waltons, or like there's
Everybody
always
has their shit, man.
you know what I mean? Like there's always gonna, even if it's not the intermediate family, there's gonna be that like
Right.
weird uncle. You know, everybody's got the. I mean, that's like that's like an internet term now, like having like the
Yeah.
uncle. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
uncle
that.
tickets.
But I guess
Yeah.
that if we're talking like toxic families,
Yeah,
a
of
toxic
course.
family, it really
Yeah,
it
yeah,
invades
I know.
it. I keep using the word functioning, right? It invades the functioning of the family.
Right.
We're not. Yeah. I think every family has their issues at times. I mean, I think I have a great family with my wife and kids,
Yeah.
but they're prior to them getting a little bit older, I don't think there's a vacation that I didn't say, I'm never going on vacation with you guys again. That became like the running joke because they would do something, to piss me off. So I wouldn't say that my family, with my wife and kids was toxic. We had our issues sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Right.
But
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That is a big difference.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah,
course.
because I mean, like for me, I've always thought of it as just this is how we grew up.
so
This is just what it was. You know what I mean? This is what it was growing up in the neighborhood, and you see the other families, and
Right.
the kids are. It was just regular thing. The things that we said, the things that we did. The ass whoopings that were handed out.
Right.
We never thought of
No,
it as
no.
being toxic with that uncle. Like that's just how he is.
And the
I'm
thing
supposed to be
is-
touched like that.
Yeah.
The thing is, too, is like when you're a kid, you don't have perspective.
Right.
You don't say like, well, this is how a family should grow. You're just like, oh, doesn't everybody kind of
Yeah,
do
yeah,
this?
yeah.
Doesn't
everybody get
parent
hit?
like this?
Yeah, right,
like,
exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's not.
And I
You know
didn't
what I mean?
find out that some
Until
of that stuff.
later in life. You
and
learn
then
how,
there
and
you
you're
go,
like, what the
right.
fuck up? Or when you're raising your own kid and you
Yep.
go,
Oh shit! man.
wait,
Yeah.
something was not right about my childhood. How come I'm,
Yeah.
trying to do my best to raise a child? And, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the worst thing is like you come from a dysfunctional family and you start dating somebody from a normal family, and you're like, what? Like nobody gets smacked at dinner,
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
right? Like how come nobody threw anything? Nobody threw anything at
or
me.
even-
What the hell's going on here?
Everybody's
Right?
having
So-
such nice conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Or even worse, having a toxic, dysfunction in your family, and then marrying somebody or being with somebody who has a dysfunctional
your
family.
family.
So now, and when you see their family, you're like, holy shit, my family is good compared
Yeah,
to that.
right.
fucking
Yeah,
family.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
all of a sudden my family's not the
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
My family's not the
Wow.
crazy
So bad.
family
You know
anymore.
what I mean?
Yeah. That's funny, bro.
true, though.
I didn't even think about that part. Word. Again, so now when do you, I guess we'll say, when you realize or think about your family and how toxic they may be, or just one or two of those people, do you end up cutting them off? Do you try to work with them to, so this way they can see the error of their ways, I guess? Like,
I guess it depends on person. I mean, like, I had issues with my brother who recently passed away, and fortunately we were able to repair things
Okay.
and when before he passed away. But I always wanted to keep him in my life, and I always wanted to keep my niece and my nephews and my sister-in-law in my life and with my kids. And so you just kind of you make choices as to when you're going to see them and stuff like that. I mean, like there were times I avoided going to them because I knew if I went, we would get into an argument, and I didn't want to get into an argument because we did better when we didn't see.
Yeah,
like we
yeah,
did better
exactly.
when we didn't see each other
Right.
sometimes, But I guess there's got to be, I know when I work with people. Was that me?
No, it was
Amazon.
Amazon.
Oh, it was Amazon. So when I work with people from dysfunctional, I always say like you have to, like if you want to if you make a choice that you want this person in your life, then you have to accept their illness,
Okay.
or their or
Right.
whatever their issues are. You have to know what you're dealing with, right? If your mom doesn't know how to show affection or praise to you, right? But you love her because she's your mom, and you want to have a relationship. You have to know going in that when you're going to see her, you can't look for that stuff,
Right.
right? Because you're not going to get that,
Yes,
right? You're going
right.
to tell her about your new job and your promotion, and she'll be like, Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
You can't do better than that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
You know, that was all you got is that, so you have to know who you're dealing with and,
Right.
and what their limitations are. The same way, if you're dealing with somebody with addiction or somebody who steals from you, you don't set yourself up. Like,
Right.
don't walk out of the room with your wallet on the table, because when you
Right.
come back, it'll be gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And stuff
Or
like
empty.
that. Or empty.
empty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Empty.
So just make sure
They
you
were
know
kind
what
enough to leave the
know what
little
you're
kid
getting
alone.
into, because it's important to have relationship with our parents or our siblings or our family, that we that you want to love them, you want to have that relationship, and you have to, if you're the healthy one, you have to know what you're getting into.
So
And
you
once
have
you
to
do
set
that, you
yourself
can't.
up.
Right, once you
Yeah.
do that, like if you make a decision, like I'm going to keep this person in my life, and right, and now so I'm going to keep this person in my life. I know who they are. I know what they're about. I know all this stuff. It's like I kind of can't get mad when they do it, because I know they do. I usually say,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
get mad. Right, you don't get mad at a baby for shitting in a diaper. Right,
Right.
it's what they do. Right, if they're 17 and they're shitting in their diaper,
That's a problem.
that's
Yeah,
that's a problem, right?
Right.
Unless there's other issues there.
Right.
So, just make sure you know what your expectations are, and that
Right.
can make things a lot easier. And limit your time, right? Limit your time. You don't want to. You're not going to spend, 8 hours with somebody, on a holiday that kind of sets you off. But you can go for coffee afterwards,
Right.
or something like that, and just kind of keep them involved in whatever way you're okay with.
Right.
Right. I mean, it also depends on how long it's been going on for, too, right? And how long have you been putting up for it? And how long have you been doing that already? Because that happens too, right? You're like, okay, I'm done. Now I'm going to set the rules, and this is how it's going to be. Oh, you want to see the baby? Well, no, I'm not coming to you. You're going to have to come to me. Like you're not kind of bending, because they always have a reason or an excuse or something, and something came up, and it's always that way. And then you get to the point where you smarten up and you're like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore. You want to see him, you're going to come. If you don't, then you're out.
Yeah, you're
Right.
stuck.
And I guess it also depends on what the issue is. Again, if you're dealing with somebody who has a serious mental illness,
Right.
somebody with your parent is schizophrenic or something like that, like what are you going to do? You're going to keep them around the same way as as they get older and they start parents they if they have to go into nursing homes, they start battling dementia. Are you going to cut them off because they don't remember you anymore? Or
Yeah.
you're gonna,
Right.
Well, I don't know, but then that would be different. That wouldn't be so much that they're toxic. It's a mental illness. Like you said, it's something that
But
they
it's still,
can't even help.
But still, mental illness can make the relationship toxic.
Yes.
So because of the behavior. So
I never thought that Alzheimer's or something or that would
Well,
be.
only because it's
I was just using it as an example,
Yeah,
as far as
okay.
the behavior.
Okay, I got it,
Certainly the
okay.
reason is just the behavior.
I would think it would only be worse or harder on you if you didn't have a good relationship with that parent in the first place, right? And then they
Okay.
got Alzheimer's, and now that makes it harder because
Right, 'cause now you don't
already
really wanna
have
deal.
animosity against
Yeah.
them or whatever's going
Right,
on, or
right.
it could be the opposite way, and then you might be more tolerant of it. You're like,
Yeah.
I know that's
No.
not my
And there
dad,
are
or
times
mom.
there are times sometimes you just have to cut people out of your life because
Right.
they're just not healthy for you, and you're not willing or able to accept what's going on. You're not willing or able to tolerate the behavior that they give back at you, and you're better off not having them in your life. So I mean, it's sad, but you deal with it and you move on and you
Right.
live your life, and you fill your life with people that
Yeah,
that meets your
positivity.
needs, right?
Yeah,
You-
right.
and
Yeah.
you let the good relationships and the positive relationships in your life flourish. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you don't want to keep doing that because then you're you're gonna have to hold yourself responsible.
Well, I
at some
think
point,
it's act of self-preservation.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Is you hear a lot of people, especially when people will go in no contact with like maybe a parent or something like that. You'll hear people say, "Well, you only get one mom and dad."
Right, yeah,
but
yeah.
like,
Yeah, whatever.
that don't
if
mean
they're going to
anything.
be toxic
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're
yeah.
going to be problematic, then
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Right.
And there's
Exactly.
no way to fix it, then what are you going to do?
Right.
and listen, relationships with
Yeah.
the relationships that parents have with their kids has changed over the generations.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we're I think fortunately, I mean, I think we all have kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, I think, like we're in the generation now where we're very open and affectionate to our children.
Mm-hmm.
We tell them that we love them all the time. We do stuff with them. They're still our kids, but we're friendly with them
Right.
and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, like maybe our parents' parents or our grandparents, like there wasn't that kind of relationship.
Right.
You know, it was, you know, I'm your father. I give you food.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Don't talk to me.
You
I
know,
don't
there
need to say
wasn't.
nothing. Yeah.
There wasn't. What do you mean? You want me to cuddle? You know, want
Yeah,
me to
hug you. The hell's
to
going
tell you
on
I
here?
love you. You know, like
yeah.
I think we've evolved into that, and I think that's great. You know,
Right.
Well, it's
Right.
good.
But-
Yeah. It's still, we still have room for improvement.
yeah, and
right?
cultures too. Like some
Yeah.
cultures, you
Right.
know, it's the families are just it's very it's colder. It's not as affectionate, and but they sort of, you know, that's just how they are. That's what they
Right.
know. So
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's toxic. It just
Yeah.
means it's different.
Yeah,
So-
different cultures. It's true. I know.
Right,
that,
'cause they-
some cultures like they don't hug. Like that's not a thing. You
Yeah.
know, like maybe Eastern cultures or maybe Eastern European cultures. Maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think of stereo. I mean,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
a stereotyping.
look, I'm
like,
sure
you
every-
actually, we don't hug. But you know, I
yeah.
don't know. You know,
I'm sure
Yeah,
every
I know.
place you go,
I'm
it's
stereotyping.
different.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
look at
yeah.
things way different than we do.
Yeah,
You know, I
of
mean,
Right.
as
'cause,
far
I
as
mean-
how we deal with things.
Because I mean, for me, half black and half Rican, and on both sides, there's we've always given love. You know what I mean? It's always the hug and the kiss and the I love yous and
Yeah, I had all that.
I
that
feel
kind
like-
of stuff. So
there's probably more cultures that are like that than there are. I think the United States is kind of like in between because we're like a melting pot of cultures.
right,
But like
right,
European cultures are like that. Like you said, like probably like Latino cultures are like that. Where like, but like I don't know, it's weird. Like some cultures are just like they're like not warm. It's
Right.
just
Yeah. Well,
very.
but
But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they don't love each other.
That's
It's just
just
how
how
they
they
have
just,
it.
that's
Yeah,
just
that's
that's how
the
they
issue.
operate. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the way
Like
it's in their DNA,
like they're
man.
more,
Right.
just being present is considered, yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, and now you're saying that though too, because when my kids were in school, and we had to go and give them lunch money because we forgot to give it to them in the morning, whatever. I shoot over there, give him have my son come down to the office, and he give me a hug and a kiss. And I said, "All right, boy, I love you, kid," and whatever. And the ladies in the office stopped. And I'm like, is everything okay? They're like, that is beautiful that your son tells you. I'm like, because he's got no choice because that's how I raised him. I'm his father.
That's how I was raised.
Yeah, you give me love every time I see you and
Give me a
vice
hug,
versa.
give me a kiss.
Give me a hug and a kiss, and you know what I'm saying?
You grew up in a Jewish
I
household.
listen, up until my parents, who besides my brother passing away in January, my mother passed away in March, and my dad last May.
Sorry, bro.
But prior to them to that, I mean, there wasn't a phone call that didn't end with "I love you."
Right.
So on both parts, my dad was a "love you boy," and and I do that with my daughters, and I don't leave the house. When they're both home, I don't leave the house without knocking on the door and telling them, I'm just running out. I love you. I'm going to work. I love you. It's always there. I don't go to sleep without giving them, saying goodnight and telling them I love them.
Yeah.
So, and that's not everything. I think I mentioned this maybe one of the other episodes I was on. Is there was one time when my daughter was about like, my younger daughter was like around 10 or 11, and she and her friend were just like going to go out to the park to play. And I said, okay, be careful. I love you. And then my daughter came back later and said her friend asked her, "Is your dad tells you he loves you?" And she was like, "Yeah, all the time." So I never hear that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean her parents didn't love her.
No.
They
Right.
just,
You
they
just
just
didn't
don't.
hear that
They
time.
don't say it.
Say it.
They
Yeah.
don't say
Because
it.
it's how and then it's like it's
Because
how
like
they were
in
brought
our
up.
culture,
and they-
like
right.
showing, displaying affection might be considered,
Yeah.
who knows
Weak
what culture they
or-
come from,
yeah.
weak or like just not like a thing.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
You don't do that
awkward.
to the boys.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, even at 60, if I was down visiting them, I'd give my parents a kiss
Right.
goodnight. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just what it wasn't even what you did. It's what like you wanted to do. It was
Right.
like just
Yeah.
it was you loved you. I was affectionate to them. So
Anytime I saw my aunts or my cousins when they came in from someplace, usually it was from California, or we went to Maryland, and every time you see someone, always said hello, you have a kiss, even your cousins, whatever,
Right.
it was just the way you were brought up, that.
Yeah, like even for us in Spanish culture, you ask. I'm trying to say how to say it. Te pide el bendición. You're asking for the blessing, the love. So when you go and you see like grandma, whatever, say oh bendición, or grandpa or whatever,
Right.
or your parents like oh bendición. Now my kids, it didn't take with them. No matter how much I, like yo, just what you have to say to grandma. This is what you got to say to grandma or grandpa. It just never took. And they would say it like in English. but they wouldn't say it in Spanish that it was. I'm like, man. So of course, the parents are like, you don't teach your kids that. I'm like, I try to teach them, they don't listen. Okay, I can't beat it into them,
Right.
But yeah, even still, I said, I talk to my parents, and it's that, asking for, like I said, just asking for, it's like asking for a blessing,
Right.
And I think that for me,
I still
us
hug
talking-
my son and give him a kiss. on
right,
the
right,
cheek.
right. But
You
then it's almost like thinking about what like we said, talking about toxic relationships. It's like even with all that, when you had the negative, you still I can't stand you, but I love you, Bendición. You know what I'm saying? It was like always that, because I never thought of it as being toxic with certain behaviors.
Right. Well, 'cause we want to love our parents. We want to love our children.
Right.
We want to love our siblings, right? I mean, that's what we're taught. We're brought up
Right.
to that, and it's just it's like repetitive situations that happen that makes the relationship toxic. Right?
Okay.
Because it's not somebody doing something one time,
Right.
unless it's unless like your brother's like banging your wife.
Right,
You know,
right,
the
right,
first
right.
time you catch him, like that can kind of do it. Or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
No.
like just the behaviors, it's repetitive, and then you just kind of get tired of it. But but you don't want that. Like you don't have a sibling and say I want to hate my sister. I want to hate my parent. I want to hate my parents.
Right.
Like it's just a series of events that occur that you just kind of say like this isn't right. I don't like why is this happening? And I bring it to you and I tell you like, hey, when you do this, I feel like this, and then they're like, well, screw you, I'm going to keep doing it anyway.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes toxic.
Yeah.
Right.
It's they keep stealing from you. They keep lying to you. They keep saying hurtful things. Those are
Or and then if they drink or drug, then it's worse.
Right.
Because they can become more abusive.
Right, because they're meaner
You know?
like that. Right. Yeah.
And that old saying, I always believe that when someone says something when they're drunk, 99%
It's
of
a
the time,
truth.
That's
Exactly how they feel. Yeah.
there's that. I think it's a Chinese proverb, like a drunk man's thoughts or a sober man's words,
Right.
or something, or a drunk man's words or a sober man's thoughts.
Yeah. Okay.
Write it backwards.
Exactly.
So then now, when you with those toxic people in the family, do you tell them
So,
as you're cutting them off? You know what I mean? Like, you know what? I don't want to talk to you anymore because you've done this, and the third. I've had it up to here with that. You know what? Bye-bye.
I just shut it down.
yeah. I mean, if you're making an
I didn't have to
effort,
say anything.
if you're making an effort to try and repair the relationship or open, honest dialogue with somebody and they're not responding to it, I think just at some point, like you walk away. And what's the purpose of telling them? Like sometimes, like we always like say, like I know what you're going to say. I'm going to read your mind. You say, well, I want to at least tell them what I think. I want to get
How I feel.
how I feel. And at some point, you're not going to get the response that you want, and it just makes things worse.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just walk away on your terms, and
Also-
and if they can't figure it out, that's part of the problem too, isn't it? Right? Like,
Yeah,
like if I stop talking to somebody who's toxic to me and they can't figure it out, one is they probably won't notice for a long time.
Yeah.
They probably won't notice that, like, well, I haven't spoken to Steve in a while,
Right.
right?
Right,
because it's
It'll be a
because you
while,
really
yeah.
it'll be a while, and then they'll probably call you up or text you like, hey, would you lose my phone number or something
Yeah.
like that, or like your phone broken? They won't sit back and say like, hey, you know what? I haven't spoken to Steve in a while. That's probably because I'm a shit to him. Like,
but that's the whole
they're
thing.
not going to
Yeah, but they
say
won't
that.
do
you
that.
know?
But see, we also grow up in a time of where shooting the dozens was the funnies.
So-
You know what I'm saying? Like we would sit there and we laugh and just, get on each other and tell jokes. So then is your one friend who's quote unquote better at it than you are? Would that be then considered the toxic?
No.
Because
But usually you're
again,
telling somebody at some point, like you're not just cutting them off. Like I think you should tell, like if it's you and I, right, and like I'm the toxic person to you. At some point you should say to me, hey, like Steve, like I don't like when you do this. I don't
Okay.
like when you talk like this to me. I know you think it's you're joking and it's funny, but it's really hurtful to me, right? You tell me that once or twice. If I keep doing it, obviously I don't respect what you're saying.
Right,
So,
right.
so then you make a decision, or I realize, oh wow, like I didn't realize I was being that offensive. I'm sorry, and it doesn't happen again,
Right.
right? But if it keeps happening, and I would just tell you to just walk away and not even tell me, because I'm not listening to you to begin with.
Right.
Right.
And you know what also too? It's not only toxic with people that you had a relationship, but it's also people that you used to have ties to. Say like it's an ex or something like that. But when you were originally dealing with them in the beginning, and whatever they would do, they would drink and they would get even more abusive and whatever, and you would just deal with it. And then when you were apart, things got, you split apart, right? Now you got to deal with it that way. And then you got the kids involved, right? So the one thing I had to learn how to do, and it took me a while, but I figured it out, was not to respond to whatever they say. The minute you go back and you get into that, they want you to come back at them so they can engage in that fucking that toxic thing. But when you don't give it to them, you starve them.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
You really do.
Exactly.
And it feels better to do that, honestly.
Yeah.
Than it is. I mean, of course it feels good to say something to somebody, go fuck yourself. You want to tell them that, but
it doesn't do anything.
Right,
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you tell me to go fuck myself, and I just say
And they're
something
gonna
back
turn
to you.
and if I
against
cut
you
you
anyway.
straight
That's the
off,
problem.
that's going to do something.
That's the other problem too, is they're going to turn against you, and now you look like the fucking
Right. Now you're the schmuck. I was opening
Because
my
when you-
heart
that's
to
what
you.
happens when you deal with manipulative people. It's
Right.
like,
So that's why you do what you do. You cut them off. Nothing. You don't give them anything. No matter what they say, what they write, whatever it is, you just do not respond.
And Tom, Tom brought up a good point earlier. Was that when we're kids, we just kind of go with the flow. Like
Right.
we think everything is normal. Like,
Yeah,
like
this is
if
the
you're,
way it is.
If you're
Yeah,
getting
it is.
if you're getting
Everybody's like
beat,
this.
Fortunately, I never got beat. I probably count on one hand the times that both of my parents have ever spanked me or something like that. But if you're a kid and one of your parents are beating you on a consistent basis, you don't you figure well, they're my parents, they're allowed to do that, they're supposed to do that, whatever. It's not until they irrationally punish me or something like that. It's not until you get a little bit older and you have a little bit more experience, like you were saying, where you start
getting more
realizing
perspective,
that wasn't what they did wasn't cool. And sometimes you realize maybe they just didn't know, they did the best they can, they did all that they knew, and it's not good enough for me now. And as an adult, you get to be responsible for your own life, right? So it's not about blaming your parents or your aunts or your uncles or stuff like that. It's about realizing, okay, I was brought up in this environment. And it wasn't healthy. I didn't like it. I can do something different about it now. I won't ever raise my kids like that. I'll be loving and supporting. I'm not going to use corporal punishment on them. I'm never going to lay a hand on them. I'm going to identify my feelings. I'm going to be verbal. I'm going to do all that stuff. And if I can't do it by myself, I'm going to seek help to do that, because I don't want to be that person, right? It's when you see it just become like a generational thing, it's people just not taking responsibility for what they can do for themselves today. Right, that's the big. It's not about blame. It's kind of like, as an adult, we don't have the right to blame people anymore. Right. We don't have the right, because we have the ability to make changes.
Right.
As a child, we don't. We don't have that.
You're responsible now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I grew up in an alcoholic family. Okay, but there's treatment now. Right?
Right.
You can do something about your alcoholism. You can do something about your mental health issues. You can do something about your anger. It may be hard work, right? And you may struggle with it, but you can do something about it.
Yeah, definitely can. Yeah, I get, like you said, I get it now. I mean, it makes sense. I really seriously didn't even, think
I'm
about
sure
a lot
you
of
grew
that.
up in the normal. As far as in my house, it was toxic because my parents. Let's just put it this way: the situation altogether was a fucking mess. Now, when you look at it now, when I was in it, and here's a good guy. You were just saying, I was in the middle of it.
And
I had Aunt Barbara, Mom, and Dad. Okay, if everybody can't figure that out, then
Yeah.
But that whole time, until I finally figured it out, I thought that was normal. I did.
Right.
When I went to someone else's house, I'm like, I didn't, or someone came to my house, I didn't think about it as being something bad because whatever.
Right.
But that's how it was. That's where I grew up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But
So,
now,
and that was toxic in itself. It doesn't necessarily have to be toxic in the sense where you're being, tell me if I'm wrong, as far as something actually being done to you when there's the environment around you is toxic just because of the relationships going on in the house and things like that.
And again, we think when we use words like toxic, we think like explosive, and it is like
That happened to in my house.
But but it doesn't have to be. It could just be. It could be real quiet because people don't talk.
That
right?
too.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a toxic
absolutely.
environment too. It's just not.
There's
Again,
different
it's like
types.
I guess it's like that. It's that repetitive behavior that interrupts the functioning of a family.
Right.
You're right.
And you can get sucked into it. When I was with my first wife, the toxic in her family alone. I mean, we were both dysfunctional. We should have never been together. But that is what it is. We are, and we are where we are. But when I look at it, and I look at just the fact that there was two people's worlds, I was saying earlier, And it collided. Now it's even more toxic now, right? So you're getting it from her family and of my family, and it's like, and then you get stuck in it because almost like you feel like you're trapped. There was a point where you were afraid to walk away or whatever, and then finally, and then you have to fucking find yourself again. And of course you're young, because I was super young when it happened. So, and again, what you were saying earlier, I said, people have it when they're young. They have no life experience. She didn't have any life experience.
Right.
You don't fucking know what to do. And if your parents aren't telling you or getting it from somewhere else, maybe you did. Well, I'm sure you had like a good grandma or grandpa or somebody that had more logic and treated you differently. Like my grandmother, I loved her. My mother's mother was awesome. I had a great relationship with her. So that for her, but she was always kind and nice and loving to me. And,
Of course.
it wasn't like the yelling, "Hey, fuck you, Bob."
Yeah.
That's what was going on in my house. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so I'm thinking of that toxicity too. You know what I mean? On top of the yelling and the screaming. But some people, like you said, obviously, you could sit and not talk to. I've had that too. So
Yeah.
And if you don't do something about it, you seek those kind of people in your life too. Like if you find that normal, right, which is kind of what happened to you, right?
Right.
Like you were brought up in that environment, and you didn't realize how messed up it was, and who'd you wind up marrying, right? Your relationship was you sought somebody who just kind of fit that mold, right? You know, it's like
and got used for my family being the way they were from that family.
Right.
Yeah,
But it was just the same thing. But it's like,
Right.
it's like if you don't think anything's wrong, and you have an abusive parent, you're gonna try and hook up with somebody who's kind of abusive, right? So I always send my daughters the meme like my girls are gonna have the reverse of daddy issues, right?
Yeah.
Like they're gonna know how to be, how they want to be treated and loved and respected and all that stuff. And but if you don't think there's anything wrong, you're never told it's wrong, you'll find the same kind of people, right?
Right. Of course. And then when you're out of it, you can kind of. It takes time. Like,
Well, you never realize how bad things are until you're out of it.
right. And then you're like,
you're out of a toxic or chaotic relationship, and it takes days and weeks and months to realize, like, wow, like he's yelling at me.
Right.
like I could put something simple as like I can leave something in the fridge and I get to eat it later. Right. Like people respect my stuff. And
you know what happens too sometimes with people is that they're so used to a toxic family that they go into a normal family and they start creating chaos.
it can happen.
It's not
absolutely.
normal. It's fucking, this is the kind
something's wrong here.
Yes, they start creating chaos. You hear that.
Right. They're telling their spouse, "Hey, what the fuck's going on with your uncle?"
Yeah.
a little shit starter. Did you hear what he said to you? You didn't hear that?
Because chaos is so normal to some people because they live in a chaotic family that they will create chaos,
Right.
because it feels weird to have normalcy, because normalcy isn't
It's
normal.
It's uncomfortable.
What is going on here?
It's uncomfortable. Yeah,
Right. It's super uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And
like
I felt
we're
that
sitting
before.
at dinner and like we're just eating.
Yeah, everybody's so boring.
Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's cursing anybody out.
Oh yeah, nobody's talking junk to each other. That's funny.
This family's
That's funny.
boring. Yeah.
And I have to say, for me, like I didn't know about it until I got to a certain age. And the toxicity is between my parents and I didn't happen until I started getting older. It wasn't so much when I was younger, like in my teens and up.
Right.
And then then that whole thing. And then when I found out what the situation was about, then that, of course, wham, was like on top of everything.
Right.
So, and then you're only a young person. You have no life. How do I deal with this? And you don't have nobody telling you.
Right.
And I definitely didn't think about therapy at that time.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was not thinking about it.
Yeah, because definitely, I mean, I didn't realize, even now, like I said, us talking about it, me thinking as we're conversing, to me, it was just a real part of life. The only thing I do differently now, I think, is I don't argue. I hate to argue. I don't like all the yelling and whatnot. And there was like my mom did, she did like to yell. She was like 5 foot nothing, and dude, bro, I'm surprised. And she should have been like an opera singer. Shut up, you know what I mean? Like it was that shit just carried through the building, and but even still, I think that right now that's the only thing I can really think of that I try to do different is just not to argue.
And just remember, people, like, don't go look at your families and say,
Yeah.
they're toxic. They
Yeah,
yelled
yeah,
at me.
no,
They're
no, no,
like,
right, definitely not,
like
yeah.
that's not like we're not. I'm not
Yeah.
sitting here. We're not sitting here
No, no,
saying
no,
like,
no.
look at your families and make them toxic
No,
and,
no,
and,
no,
and
no,
examine every
definitely not.
behavior.
No,
That's
no,
not
no,
what.
No, it's just
I mean,
we're having a good conversation about.
Yeah.
We all have
if you
experiences
know,
in
you
our
know.
life.
You know,
Right,
it's
you
one
know,
of
you
those,
know,
you know,
right.
you
You know, you know. When,
Yeah.
if you cringe, if you cringe family events,
know.
right? If you avoid family events or you hate going to family events, if you you know if you're a teenager and you hear your parents' car door close because they're coming home and you're saying, "Oh shit, they're
Yeah.
home now," and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and you're not doing anything wrong,
Right,
right? You know,
anxiety.
stuff
And
like
it's an
that.
occurrence,
You know, right? If
yeah.
you hear
If
them
they're
walking,
sitting-
right? If every time your
a constant
doorknob
thing,
turns, you're worried about something happening,
Right.
Who's going to yell at me?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
that's something to look
Then
into. But
that's different.
Yeah.
But
Or
yeah,
if you're
but if
sitting
you're
in
just
the-
like, is my family?
Yeah.
If you have to ask, they're not.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
if
yeah.
you-
But listen, if you're
that's
sitting
great,
in the
but-
car or something, or we're listening to this, and you're going, yeah, oh yeah, that happens.
Yeah,
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 then-
yeah, that's different. But don't
you-
don't
then you're
make
in
it
good
to
company.
something.
Like
Yeah.
if you identify,
Right,
then
exactly.
we're glad
Right.
because we're not alone.
Right, it's like if you have to ask how much something is, you can't afford it.
Right.
If you have to ask,
Right.
is my family really? It's
Yeah, it's
probably
probably
not.
not.
It's
Right.
probably just
Yeah.
you probably just everyone's struggling and everyone has bad
Yeah, I mean,
days
and you know,
yeah.
people bicker. You know, it's normal when you're living under one roof and be like, oh, you can't put the toilet seat up, you know,
Right,
stuff
yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
I
my
think,
parents.
I
pick
think
it. My
that's
father
pretty.
lost his front teeth from my mother throwing a coffee cup at him.
Holy jeez, many crickets.
And especially
not
especially when one of your kids, if your kids are like you, like if you have like
Yeah.
if like I have two girls, my younger daughter is me, so
Right.
we battle all the time.
Yeah.
My
Oh yeah, because
my wife just looks at her and says, "She's you. What do you expect?"
exactly,
So,
yeah.
I mean, like, yeah. So
Mhm.
it's crazy.
That's
It
hilarious.
is.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
It is. It's
I think
nuts.
like there's a difference between like arguing and like bickering. It's like, you know, next time you're upstairs, can you shut the light off? You know, like I think that's pretty normal stuff.
But if next time, if you don't shut the fucking light
I'm
off,
gonna break
I'm
your
coming up
leg.
there, or I come up there with a bat and say, "You don't want to shut the light off?" Boom, and I knock out all the lights and I break the light switch. Now the fucking lights off.
Yeah.
That's
That's
probably
where it's a problem.
toxic.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
I
you
would
say
think
that.
that's a problem.
Then
That's
yeah.
kind of what with
Right, yeah. Because then it's like, you know, oh, you're gonna slam the door to your room, take the door off the hinges and put the door in the freaking, you know, move the
you
door.
hear about
Yeah,
sheet
yeah,
up.
yeah.
that
Not
shit,
even the
taking
sheet,
doors
dude.
off.
Not even the sheet. Not even the sheet.
Yeah.
Not even the
Yeah,
sheet.
that's not a good.
Yeah,
I'm
or
not,
take the
I'm
doorknob
not a
off.
big fan of that.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying, like, you know, that.
That's
Yeah.
a
Well,
toxic
if-
behavior.
I would only
yeah,
say
yeah,
as
yeah,
far-
yeah,
I would
yeah.
have to agree to it.
Yeah,
I've never done it, but if my son or my daughter was doing something and I asked them not to do that one thing, and they continue to do it and defy me,
Right.
then I would definitely say, okay, then you don't deserve to have a door.
Mhm.
And then I would take it away, and then when you get
Yeah,
ready
yeah.
to have it, I'll
Right.
put it back on.
Right.
I'm not going to break the door. I'm not going to do
No,
like
no,
you. I'm going to
definitely,
take
yeah.
the hinge pins
Right,
out,
yep, and
and I'm
that's
going to
it.
put the door away.
Uh-huh.
And I know you won't be able to get it back in. Even if I leave them out, you're never going to
Yeah,
figure it
you're
out.
not gonna- by the time you figure it out, I bet, you know, maybe I'll
Right.
think about you
I
deserve
may
the
have
door
to
back.
get a new door.
Hell yeah. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, because it's outdated. Yeah, no,
But
listen.
That maybe it's wrong, but
No. But that's the thing. I don't know. Is it wrong? That
I
would
don't
be
think that's
toxic.
toxic, though.
Right. I don't know.
Is that toxic? Would that be considered toxic?
I'm not a big fan of taking doors off. Take the computer away. Shut off the Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Take the phone,
okay.
stuff like that.
That's up.
I don't know. I think people have a right to privacy.
Well,
So-
yeah. I think so.
unless like their behavior is self-destructive and you have to be able to watch them and they can't lock them in.
But again,
Yeah,
if I
that's
tell you,
but then they probably should be in a hospital. If
right,
if
yeah.
you have to
Okay.
take the
Yeah,
door off
agreed.
because you're afraid your kid's gonna hurt themselves, then they probably need to be hospitalized.
Right, no,
But
definitely.
Other than
Yeah,
that,
but
I'm
if
not,
you're being-
that's just me. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a big.
My thing is like, say your daughter, she's cursing at you.
Right.
She's saying, "This is my fucking room. I'm gonna do what I want. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me about."
Wah,
And then
wah.
you try to reason with her, and you try to do all the steps
Yeah.
that we're saying,
Yeah.
and then you get to that point, you go, "Okay,
Yeah. No.
what are you doing with a hammer and screwdriver?" Let me show you.
Yeah.
And then you take the pins out.
Yeah,
And then
no.
you take the door off.
No,
And you go,
if-
when you learn to know how to talk to
Right.
me, and then you understand the reason, because you ever see that comedian that does the thing where his daughter goes, she asked her to do something. She goes, "Well, where's your checklist?"
Sir.
He goes,
Oh,
"Well,
yeah.
the last time I remember was you were in a warm house in a warm bed with covers. Check.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember who the stand-up comedian was,
But it was hysterical,
it's
man. I'm like,
it's-
exactly.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
I mean, I again, that's where I would question, you know, what then my kids would consider toxic.
Right.
You feel me?
Right.
Because for me, I'm disciplining, and we only use the door as an example. You know what I mean? Because like I said, if you're in a funky mood, I get it. Or if I tell you to do something and you're gonna be defiant, go up the stairs and slam the door. I let it slide the first time, like, yo, don't slam the door anymore. You do it again because you think you're king shit. Okay, now we're having a problem. Now the door stays open. Now you do it a third time, and you know what? You can just stay without a door because you're slamming the door. You know, it's that punishment.
Off when they're not get home and they see it.
Oh, you see, no, I'm more. I guess.
The fucking door.
But right, I'm sadistic. I think that's where I come in. Like I'm a little bit.
I'm
just.
just. I'm not about. I just think it just.
I understand.
But
you know what?
I think it kind of
how we were brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of shit my parents would do. To
Well,
me.
because if I slam the door,
I get it. I get the reasoning. I just.
right.
I think it's more. There's more to it when you do stuff like that. Especially teenagers, you take away their privacy, and I think they're entitled to that.
yeah,
And-
no,
and-
you're
and-
entitled to the privacy when you go take a shower.
And listen, and the bottom line is that at some point, like our kids may not listen to us, right? No matter what you do,
Right.
right?
Well, that goes
and then what do you do,
Well,
right?
no,
Like
and
if you
I
tell
get
them
it.
you can't do this, and they do, and you tell them, and you're like, do you throw them out? Because
Right.
sometimes you can't, like,
But you're
like
still not going to slam the door in my
Right,
house.
so-
That's where I'm
yeah.
at.
But would that example be the same used in this example where, let's say, you borrow the car and you're not supposed to have it, but you get it because of a certain situation, and then you drive recklessly and you hit mailboxes and you put damage on the car, and now
I'm going to take away their door.
No. I'm going to take away the car.
I'm going to take away the car.
Yeah,
You're not
that's
going to drive
different.
anymore.
But that's
You're done.
different though, because
Because you can't be
again,
responsible.
this is me. This is my opinion. Right? Is taking away their car, taking away their phone, shutting off the internet, stuff like that. That's different. You're taking away an object. You're taking away a privilege. I just don't see a bedroom door as a privilege. I just see a bedroom door as
basic
as a basic. Yeah, it's part of the basic need. It's like it allows me to go into my space and allows me to close off. I just like would you take the door off the bathroom?
No, I wouldn't.
Right,
do
it's
that.
like, there's just privacy.
Right.
Then you have to
things.
put the sheet up.
So
Well, yeah, then you have to put the
but
shit
but,
up.
but
And a freshener.
taking away their car or taking away their credit card or taking away that's just it's different. That I think just like the door just kind of represents a different aspect of their life, and I know parents that do that. I know people have done that. It's not something that.
Okay.
That's not something that I don't know if it's a great idea, because then they always know, like, you can just take away their dignity.
No, well, I will say though, I think there's an age limit to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it if my daughter's 17 years old. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If they were like 10 years old.
Yeah, but then you know what? You're staying. Sit over there. I'm staying in here. You sit over there.
Right, but if they go into their room to slam the door, I said I think that's what my get up is.
Come out. You don't deserve to be in this room right now. You need to come and sit out over here with me.
Put them in the hallway on the floor.
Because the room
Or
itself is a privilege, not the door.
Yeah, the room is their room. It's their space.
Yeah.
We we always say it's my house, but we give our kids their room.
Right.
It's their space. I can remove them from that space for a little bit,
Right.
But eventually, when they go to sleep, when I feel that they're safe, go up to your room. Go up to your room. Because what are you really doing? It really is. It's like a power move. Like, I can do this.
Right.
Well, it's better than me choking the shit out of you.
Right. That's kind of how I was looking at it.
Right. Again, so it's it's out of your frustration.
But you know what?
Rather than there's really not a purpose to it, except that you're frustrated because
They slammed the door.
because you couldn't get your kid to do what you wanted them to do. Right. That's why I think that's why parents hit their kids. Aside from an instant reaction, like, get away from the stove or something like that.
That's
Like
of
when
course.
when
Or
parents,
pulling them by the hair if they're
Right,
walking
right.
in the middle of the street and a car's coming.
right. That's different. But like when
That's
you
the only thing you can grab.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Right, but when you hit your kid as punishment, it's because you're frustrated that they didn't do what you want them to do, and you have no other option, because hitting them really doesn't change the circumstances. And you can say, well, they won't do it again, but we don't know that. We don't know that, because if you've ever been spanked more than once, right? You've done it again. You've done something again, so it doesn't really
but
work.
But it also goes to, like, all right, so Kenny and I agree on that, or we have that in common, I should say, because that's something we were like, all right, that's what, But that came because our parents kind of did that in a
Right.
sense. So we're getting that from
From them.
it's learned behavior. So what I want to say also too, learned behavior can also be broken.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
my dad would get beat for his money, his bike money. And his mother was an alcoholic.
Mhm.
She treated him like shit. She
Right.
beat him all the time.
Oh yeah.
He wound up going in the Navy, got away from her, and then when I was a kid, he couldn't hit me and my brother.
Mhm.
And if he did, out of the times, like you said, I could count on my hand, if that many.
Yeah.
He got sick. He'd have to go run to the bathroom
Right.
and
Yeah.
throw up because
Well,
he didn't like the fact that he was sitting his
I
kid.
completely get that. In fact, I'm gonna say, without getting into too much detail, is I use the way I was raised as a blueprint on what not to raise your kids as. You know what I
Right,
mean?
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so my
You
dad,
do eventually. I mean, you do figure
you
it out.
learn. You know, some people don't. Some people just go, "This is the way I was raised. I'm gonna raise my parents
Yeah.
kids this way. I'm gonna beat the shit out of
Well,
them, or I'm gonna."
it used to always be like if
tell
you,
them
know, if
they're
you
an
came,
asshole,
Yeah,
or
right, right.
tell them they're worthless because that
Yeah.
worked for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
not if you're telling your kid that you're worthless, because then
Yeah.
it didn't really work for you.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just, I'm being
Yeah.
sarcastic.
Right.
You know, when I say that worked for me, but yeah.
They used to always say,
Yeah.
if you grew up in if you grew up in an abusive household, you would more likely be an abusive parent yourself,
Right.
Likely.
Yeah.
or
Sure.
not.
No.
Because there's one of two things.
Yeah,
Either
you
you're going to
say
be
that
or you're
was-
not going to
Right.
be.
shitty.
So,
I'm
yeah.
not doing that, or
What I
that's
was
the way it is. Yeah,
But
like,
see,
I
like-
said, again, some people don't wake up when they, like I
Right.
said, the perspective we were talking about that. You wake, you're raised with, and you don't have that perspective, but some people never get that perspective.
No, and
Just
they
go,
wind up
"Okay,
turning
this way
into
you
the-
do it. I was taught this way.
Yeah.
I'm
And they
gonna do
turn
it
into the
this
people
way."
that
Yeah.
did it
That-
to them, and they
Right.
wind up doing the same thing to whoever they, their children and so on.
They,
It's like a
they
fucking
keep
domino
like you.
effect.
I was punished.
Cycle.
I'm going
It
to punish
just-
you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I said before, that meme or the thing I was saying to my daughters, like they're gonna have the opposite of daddy issues.
Right,
Right.
right,
You know,
right,
'cause,
right.
It's not
Right.
gonna happen. Listen, my dad's father ran off when my dad was 13, stole his bar mitzvah money, and left, and that was it. And my father was a fucking amazing father. He
Right.
was
Yeah.
there for us. He was loving and caring and affectionate, and he wasn't his dad. He wasn't Grandpa Leo.
I think
Right,
that's.
right.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's what how people turn lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
You know? They,
Break
they
the
say,
cycle.
My dad wasn't like
yes,
his
I'm
dad,
not
and he
gonna-
wasn't like his mother, but there were some things, of course,
Yeah.
that he still wound up having.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes time, right? So, like
Yeah.
with all of us,
Yeah.
you get to a point, and hopefully you learn, and you get into a different space, and you're comfortable with yourself, and you're not allowing people to do that shit to you anymore. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. I'm done with that.
And fortunately, I am every bit my dad.
Right.
So, and I'm proud of that. So that's
That's why you won't take the door off the hinges.
So-
Right.
that's why I won't
There you
take the-
go.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
This
But
was
with
good
that,
conversation.
Yeah. But with that, that's our time for today.
All right.
That was awesome. So
Yeah.
that was cool. Ended up on a good note.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Always a
appreciate you
pleasure,
being
always
here
a
like
pleasure.
always.
Can't
Yeah.
wait for the sports
Good
one,
pick,
too.
Tom.
So
Yeah.
That was a good one. Yeah. It was more
Tom
combo
did a
than I
good
thought.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I try to.
Yep.
I don't come with ideas for
No,
topics
yeah.
often, but when I do, I try to
Picks
come
a
up with a
good
good one.
The,
you
the
know?
most
Absolutely.
emerging man in the world. Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
I don't always drink beers, but when I do,
When I do.
Yeah.
prefer Dos Equis.
There you
Oh,
go.
look, they got a free advertisement.
There you go. There it is. Yep. So with that, thank everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. So love, peace, and hair grease.
Live long and prosper.
And go vegan.
Let's go Mets.
Yeah.
Yes.